I was quite disappointed by my experience at Balliol. I had imagined it to be this incredible place with, Tolkien's at every corner and everybody being a, Python-esque wit. And it wasn't that at all. That was crushingly disappointing. That was another, dreaming spires, aspiring to be dreaming. It wasn't that for me. I had some really difficult experiences there. It's all wrapped up again with my father. My father was terminally ill. My father died at the end of my first year. Didn't end well. Pastoral care was appalling. I'm sure it's improved now, but back then it was still very much, stip up a lip. It happens to us all.
Welcome to the Longest Day podcast. I'm Leah, your host and the founder of Broadstairs Consulting. We help rebuild relationships and facilitate effective dialogue. We are convinced that people matter and that conversations count, so we started The Longest Day, a series of conversations where we learn from the resilience, determination, and candor of our guests. As they look back on their longest days, our hope is that it will empower you to look forward. We hope their stories will be a part of shaping yours. Ray Meir is an audiovisual innovator with 30 years of experience in broadcast media, content production, technology innovation, studio system building, and channel management. He has worked with global brands and media conglomerates. Ray is a former UN TV producer and EVP of Universal Music Group. As an immersive audio pioneer, he founded an immersive storytelling production company, producing the complete works of Christopher Marlowe in a world-first series of performances. Previously, Ray led the digital and creative industry portfolio for the Thames Estuary Growth Board. He sat as an advisor for the inaugural board of the Institute of Cultural and Creative Industries at the University of Kent, and for In-House Records, an award-winning music tech training scheme based across HM Prison Services. He was also a NED for GoAco, the software development company, working with several UK government departments. He's also been an olive farmer for the last 25 years. He mills and blends organic extra virgin olive oil from his wife's ancient groves in Sicily. He's a certified olive oil sommelier with expertise in identifying the distinctiveness of olive oil varieties. He regularly sits as an expert panel judge for internationally recognised olive oil competitions. Ray is a trustee for the Marlowe Theatre, Kent Music, and the Wildwood Trust. Well, Ray, welcome to The Longest Day. Why don't you tell our listeners about your longest day?
Yes, so I've thought a great deal about the specifics, and we're going back to 1979. We're talking about the first week of December. I'm not going to give a specific date, but you're talking 3rd to the 6th of December. And it's Liverpool. It's North Liverpool. It's Seaforth and Litherland, just north of Bootle, postcode Liverpool 21. It's cold. It's wet. It's dark. It gets dark very quickly in Liverpool in the winter months. And we lived above my father's second-hand junk store. My father owned the Seaforth swap shop. It was a novel, Aladdin's Cave of junk, that he brought the concept of bartering back into the boondoggle areas of Liverpool. So you didn't just have to use cash to buy and sell things. You could bring in items and you could swap them. So you could come in with a tennis racket and walk out with half a fishing rod, because a tennis racket wouldn't be worth a fishing rod, but which sounds amazing, and it was amazing, but it did also encourage one of Liverpool's favourite pastimes, which is stealing things. So you could argue that my father was quite a lo-fi fence for goods. I'm pointing this out because the longest day for me was that run up before Christmas, and the specific day, I have a memory specifically. And that was, we didn't have any Christmas paraphernalia. There was no tinsel. There was no Christmas tree. There was no lights blinking. There was nothing. We didn't have Christmas in our household. My father, beyond being a grassroots entrepreneur, was also the hardest drinking Muslim that you would ever meet. So we didn't do Christmas. And that was very strange, because there we were, obviously, in Liverpool in the UK, and Christmases abound, perhaps not as commercially machine-oriented as it is today, but it was still very much Christmas. And the reason why I've tracked that date down specifically was because of this memory of my mother wrapping presents and me getting terribly excited, thinking, oh, well, this is it. This is finally going to happen. She's wrapping presents, and there I am as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old thinking, all right, this is it. Finally, there's going to be presents. Because at that point, we never had any presents. You know, we'd get, you know, in school, you get Christmas cards from your friends. And, you know, they weren't out. They were just either kept in the kit bag or just put in the bin. And it always confused me, because I was always asking the question, well, why aren't we allowed? Why don't we deserve this? And so the longest day for me was watching my mum. I've got a very clear memory of it, in the hallway area, wrapping, and me thinking, like I say, this is it. Come the day, those gifts weren't for us. So the longest day for me was that hope of the presence, of feeling some form of inclusion within Christmas, and what that represented. Society, culture, being accepted. You know, we were quite literally the only Asians in North Liverpool at that time. And so when Christmas Day did finally arrive, no tree, like I say, no tinsel, no lights, nothing, and no gifts. And that shapes you. It shapes you because the crushing disappointment. You know, like I say, I know there was no Santa Claus. I watched my mother wrap the gifts. Never wanted to pierce the balloon of my friends at school who were giddy with their own aspirations and their hopes and their dreams and their ideas of Christmas and what they're going to get, what they could hope for. Never wanting to sort of say, yeah, it's not like that for everyone. This doesn't exist. This is all, you know, whatever. I didn't know the words, but had an inherent feeling that, okay, this is all metaphorical, allegorical, whatever it is. You know, I subsequently learnt as I grew up that you know, I've got this cynicism based on the sort of the difficulties of trying to understand that as youth. But what I will say, even though that sounds all tragic, the crushing disappointment of not receiving the gifts were, you know, got over it really quickly, because it was a case of, well, no, we don't do this, so that's why. But it was hard not to think that I was somehow, you know, guilty of something or other. It was very hard not to think, well, hang on, you know, we've done something wrong. Because it didn't, you know, you'd look at the TV Times, the Radio Times, and it was all, you know,
glitz and glamour.
It was, yeah. And also you look forward to it. You know, the television, every program on the then 3 channels, pre-Channel 4, was all, you know, the holiday film. And so it's not that I was unaware of the cultural language of peace, harmony, goodwill to all men. These things have subsequently become incredibly important to me. So the massive benefit of the longest day, the longest day of hoping that those gifts were due to us, that there was a period on that day where I thought, oh, there's a hope there. But the upshot of all of that is that Christmas is extraordinarily important to me.
We'll come on to that in a second. One of the things that you said is the juxtaposition between living above your father's shop and then going to one of the top schools in Liverpool. How did that come about? And how did you manage that juxtaposition as a really young person?
So it was perfectly natural for me because I am an unusual individual in the fact that I only went to one school my entire life. So I went to, apart from kindergarten, I went to Merchant Taylors from the age of 4 till the age of 18. So it's all I ever knew. The juxtaposition was my father worked incredibly hard, and my elder brother, he paid for my elder brother to go. He worked extremely hard. My elder brother, my sister, and at one stage also my middle brother. So he was paying through the nose for this quality education. And I came along, and the juxtaposition was very natural. It was haves and have-nots. Most of the people who went to Merchant Taylors would come from the north part of the Northern Line, going up to sort of Formby, Birkdale, Southport way. Hardly anybody, a very small percentage came from South Liverpool, Central South Liverpool. And so for me, it was just perfectly normal. It was these people have yachts and summer holidays and aspirations, whereas for us, it was long, balmy summers, kicking cans down the street, quite literally. Let's hang out at the building site. Let's go see whether we can throw bricks through windows down the dock road. So yeah, no, in answer to your question, it's perfectly natural. It was very clear to me that we were different in colour, different in culture, food, clothing, language, and also status, very, very difficult to think about now because I can classify all. I'm answering your question in terms of classification, but at the time it was a done deal. It was perfectly normal.
So you have a father who's an entrepreneur. You have people around you who aren't from where you're from and whose native tongue you speak fluently, but is not what's spoken at home. And you've experienced this crushing disappointment that you say has given rise to cynicism. How do you think experiencing crushing disappointment at an early age has informed your personality and the career decisions that you've made?
Trying not to be disappointed, or trying to engineer situations where you can mitigate disappointment, but not in a walls up defensive way. And I think that's got a lot to do with my father. And I think it's got a lot to do with the fact that he was an extraordinary individual. And I don't just mean that because he's my father. He had lots of demons, and he had, he was a terribly afflicted individual, but very much a pushing boundaries, very much a how does one imagine the future, on top of all of these juxtapositions and this cynicism. My father was always very clear, very clear. He would say, look around, look at all of this around you. This isn't for you. This isn't yours. This is temporary. This is a means to an end. You will get out of here. You're not from this place. You're better than this. That's number one. Number two, he would say to me, do what you want to go do. So that strength even though it was conflicted, shaped me partially with all the other experiences and influences that I've had.
Well, just jumping in there for a second, because you said that your formative experiences, you had the privilege of going to one school, which I, as somebody who went to 11, I'm clearly very jealous of. But after school, you then went on to university. Let's talk about the juxtaposition between where you've come from and this idea that you can achieve anything that you set your mind to.
Yeah.
Was that your experience when you arrived at Oxford?
Getting into Oxford was very much set your mind to it, be relentless, laser focused, all of that sort of stuff, and not listening to the noise, not being told that you don't fit, you don't deserve, you don't, or you're not, it's not for you. I completely ignored. So that probably does have a link directly into The Longest Day, as in like, well, why don't I deserve? Why don't I belong? Why didn't I get those Christmas presents? I worked out very, very quickly that it's like, well, there's no real reason for why I shouldn't be getting those Christmas presents. So the Oxford thing lets me very clear, merchant tailors, they weren't exactly the most supportive of me applying, because it's all statistics, how many pupils apply, how many pupils get in and don't get in. But not only did I apply to Oxford University, I applied to do jurisprudence, which I suppose now, but certainly then was considered one of the most difficult courses to then philosophy, politics and economics, PPE. But on top of that, so it's not just the double whammy, it's the triple whammy of me applying to Balliol. Let me be clear about Balliol. There's two reasons why I applied to Balliol. Number one, there's quite a few colleges at Oxford you have to choose. I think it was 3, 2 as your main choices, 1 as a backup. Balliol was top of one of the columns alphabetically. So it's sort of like, well, there you go, that'll do. And then when I looked into my research, it said stuff like it was the most left-wing, inclusive. That was the language. Didn't turn out that way. My experience, it didn't turn out that way. I was quite disappointed by my experience at Balliol. I had imagined it to be this incredible place with Tolkien's at every corner and everybody being a Python-esque wit, and it wasn't that at all. That was crushingly disappointing. That was another dreaming spires, aspiring to be dreaming. It wasn't that for me. I had some really difficult experiences there. It's all wrapped up again with my father. Father was terminally ill. My father died at the end of my first year. Didn't end well. Pastoral care was appalling. I'm sure it's improved now, but back then it was still very much, stip up a lip. It happens to us all.
And that's one of my questions, because these disappointments are not minor. They are significant. Particularly significant emotionally. Who did you have around you and who supported you through these experiences?
Okay, as I can't find a name, that's because there was nobody. I was somebody that was very confused, and it's still taking me a long time to work through it all. I would say it's that. And so it was all about constant reinvention. It was all about being the chameleon. It was all about being the person that I felt I needed to be accepted in the room. So there was no person that I necessarily confided in. The family, we're an unusual family. We're all quite, estranged. But during that period, I didn't really relate to anybody around me from a peer group perspective. When I left school and went to university, I drew a line under my school friendships. I had conversations with the chaplain at Balliol. Wonderful man. So if I would nominate someone who helped me and supported me through the one ear that I could go to. Now that I'm saying this out loud, I'm going to backtrack. I'm allowed to change my opinion. There were certainly one or two teachers at school towards the end of my A-levels who, because I broke down, the things were really difficult at home, illness, etc. But there were one or two teachers in particular at school, not all, that were hugely supportive and listened. These things are buried and under a locked door, but there were periods where I would spend hour upon hour in certain tutors' offices, and it was just an outpouring. They weren't even talking to me. They just sat, and I just chain smoked, and just it all came out. Akin to the chaplain of Balliol, an amazing human being who listened. And I'm saying what I'm saying because actually the conversation I had with him was about we would talk openly about how difficult South Asians found it at Oxford to acclimatise. And we had this open discussion about, well, the freedoms that one is afforded at university, it was almost too difficult to compute for Asians because they didn't know. I'm not just talking about alcohol and drugs. I'm talking about the whole emotional spectrum and landscape of having to deal with life. It's really tough, really, really tough. And it's not just me. Please don't think that it's just I'm saying this. I went through what I went through, but I recognise it then. I'm sure it's different now. I hope it's different now. I'm sure it's different now, and certainly for my kids. So how do I reconcile? And going back to the earlier point that you asked in terms of how are you formed as an individual through disappointment? Well, like I say, it's countering it with ambition. But one of the issues I know I face with that kind of relentless ambition of like, okay, I'm going to push this. I'm going to go to Oxford. I'll go and work at the UN. I'll do the things that I'm going to go do. It's tempering that, making sure that I get to celebrate Christmas. Is that religious? Probably it is religious too. I'm not talking about any kind of conversion here. I just mean conceptually what Christmas represents. It's wonderful, right?
Well-being. You know the facts. Things are worse than ever. Burnout, trauma, absence, attrition. Leaders are tired of the empty gesturing about mental health. Leaders are resigned to ticking boxes, obliged to throw money away on medically flimsy, temporary solutions that have failed workforces. Adagio VR is the culmination of decades of work by a fellow of the Royal College of Psychiatrists. Partners of the NHS and Oxford University, this is the world's first ever virtual reality program using clinical therapeutics accessible anywhere. Take meaningful action. Remove the need to cope. Adagio VR.
What has been the greatest joy of having your own family designed at will and being able to celebrate Christmas in all the ways that you imagined it could have been for you growing up?
That's a great question. It's extraordinary, being the best father I can be is all about that magic of Christmas. And it isn't just the gifts. It's about family. It's about being together. Nobody does Christmas like we do Christmas. I talked to you about no tinsel and no lights. I mean, we have 4 Christmas trees in our house. We don't just have one. And I'm not just talking about, a little Christmas tree here. I'm talking about every Christmas tree is a Christmas tree of specific design with all the baubles collected from all around the world, of all the places that we've been.
I'm getting the feeling you try to exceed yourself each Christmas, and I'm not sure I want to indulge in what that might look like at this juncture. But what I would like to know is whether your experiences with disappointment that came from your longest day have affected the way that you have prepared your children to engage with and experience disappointment.
Look, disappointment is clearly an important part of your mental makeup, because it's a word that is used in education. I'm not really too sure. It's a very difficult one to describe or explain, but resilience, okay? Because disappointment is connected to being resilient, how one takes the knocks, when you're learning how to ride a horse, or ride a bike, you fall off, you get back up on the bike as quickly as you can. You dust yourself down. You all the knocks you take, all the cuts you and bruises, they form you because they are the memories that instill within you, or should instill with you if you analyze them. Where did I go wrong? Where did I go right? How do I not, you stick your hand in the fire, it gets singed and you're like, I'm not going to do that again. That's obvious. Is it? Well, I don't think most people are that self-aware. Genuinely, I'm not trying to say that I'm some sort of, uber personal psychiatrist, but question. And absolutely, the disappointments have framed my decision making. I don't want to be disappointed, but at the same time, I know that decisions I make will lead to disappointment. I'm the executive producer of the Marlowe sessions. And I think what we did with the Marlowe sessions, because we had such, we attacked it with such verve, people that I respect in the industry that have got way more experience than me, have openly told me that what we did with the Marlowe sessions is we produced what a national touring company would spend 2 years planning, would spend 10 times the budget, and spend a year going on the road doing it. We did all of that in 2 months, 7 times. And we've got the wounds for being so ambitious and arrogant. And am I disappointed? I am disappointed that it's been this painful, but we knew that this was coming. So going back to your central question of, have these experiences shaped me? Yes, but they haven't shaped me to come to the conclusion to not give it a go, to look at the difficult path and go, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to choose the easy path. I studied law at Oxford University as the youngest television producer at the United Nations, as one of the highest ranking, if not the highest ranking South Asian at the world's largest music company. And I've gone and done all of these things, not because they were easy and I could have stayed and it would have been easy to stay and take things I didn't necessarily agree with, but that's neither here nor there. I had to do the jobs because they were difficult. And what was even more difficult was to choose another path. Is that confusing? Yes. Am I still juggling with those decisions? Yes. Have I questioned those decisions? Yes. But it all goes back to that longest day of, well, what do I deserve? And what is predefined? What because of who I am and where I'm from and because of my background and because of my culture, that I'm only due this. I'm a very stringent, vocal supporter of you can do and say whatever you want, wherever you want, whenever you want, because opinions are just opinions, but you can go do whatever you want. So you did ask me about, my kids and whether this comes across in terms of disappointment. I sort of mentioned about resilience. It's about responsibility as well.
Now, there were no presents on your longest day.
No.
But what about food? If you had to live your longest day again, what food would you choose to fuel it?
Oh my gosh. So my mother was one of the first Asians in the Asian community in the Northwest, small community in and around Liverpool, that subsequently, after that longest day, I'm talking, 10 years later, she was the first of the amazing mothers and Asian cooks that did a fusion meal. Subsequently, this became a Christmas Day thing because all the shops closed. But early in my life, there was a nothing. But later, she did a curried Christmas lunch. A roast turkey with the, spiced cumin potatoes. She was the first sprouts. The whole thing, did the whole, right, going to transpose that English-British thing, and we're going to make it Indian, Bengali.
I really shouldn't ask this question because it makes me hungry every single time. But I also think that Christmas dinner should be available in the summer, because by the time it comes around at Christmas, everybody's already bored of it. So, it should be available all throughout the year. Ray, thank you for taking us down memory lane, to sharing that juxtaposition and the challenges of disappointment and the hardening that comes from the hard knocks in life, and the self-belief and the resilience and the determination and the responsibility and the agency that you've taken to overcome that, and the joy that you have in transforming what you'd experienced for the benefit of your family. Thank you for coming on The Longest Day.
Amazingly, thank you for the opportunity to delve into that part.
You've been listening to a Broadstairs Consulting Limited podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. Tune in soon to hear the next instalment of The Longest Day. Copyright 2024, production copyright Broadstairs Consulting Limited, all rights reserved.